The signal was clean. Not just clean, it was pristine. A beautiful, flowing river of data packets, visualized on my main monitor as a serene, blue waterfall. On the secondary screen, a topographical map of the Cascade foothills showed the signal's path. A perfect, glowing line threading through treacherous peaks and dark valleys where cell service went to die. "Signal's clear as a bell tonight, Jack." Maria's voice crackled through my studio speakers, professional and calm, but with an undercurrent of warmth I'd come to recognize. "Running a final diagnostic on the new repeater. How's it looking on your end?" I leaned into the broadcast quality microphone that sat on my desk like a monument to over-engineering. 5 by 5, Maria. I can see every packet. You could probably use this signal to order a pizza from the top of Mount Rainier. You guys are all set for the weekend." "You're a lifesaver, Jack. Literally," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "The county's official comms are, well, you know." I chuckled, leaning back in my worn leather chair. "Let's just say I've seen better signals come off a toaster oven. Happy to help. Stay safe out there." "You too. Kilo Sierra Alpha Romeo clear." The line went silent, but the room was never truly quiet. It hummed with the gentle, life-affirming whir of cooling fans from my server rack, the soft glow of multiple monitors, and the latent power coursing through the thick coaxial cables that ran through the wall and out to the backyard. To the needle. That's what I called her. A sleek, 60-foot monopole radio tower painted a discreet cloud gray. She was my baby, my passion project, and my one-man stand against entropy. When I'd left the Air Force, I traded the structured chaos of military communications for the quiet, lucrative life of a freelance network security consultant. The pay was better, and nobody yelled at me for my coffee mug having a non-regulation picture of a cat on it, but the quiet got quiet. The itch to do something that mattered, something more than just making sure some corporation's quarterly earnings report didn't get leaked, never went away. So I built the Needle. It was a precision-tuned, privately funded piece of infrastructure that the local volunteer search and rescue team, the one Maria commanded, relied on. The official county system was a joke, a relic from the 90s that couldn't penetrate the granite and forests that made our slice of Washington state so beautiful and so dangerous. My tower, however, could thread a signal into the deepest canyon, a guiding light for the helicopter pilots who went out in the dead of night to find people on the worst day of their lives. It was my secret contribution, my purpose. I glanced out the window, past my meticulously organized workbench, to admire my handiwork. The needle stood straight and true against the deepening twilight. It was elegant, functional, and, in my humble opinion, a thing of beauty. Unfortunately, my new neighbor disagreed. I could see her standing on the immaculate porch of the beige house across the street, hands on her hips, head tilted, staring. Her gaze felt like it could lower the temperature of my coffee. Carol Miller. I'd learned her name from the welcome basket she pointedly did not give me when she moved in a month ago. She had an aura of perpetual disappointment. As if the entire world was a poorly managed department store, she was perpetually on the verge of demanding to see the manager of. Her unblinking stare was fixed on my tower, my beautiful, life-saving needle. "And so it begins," I muttered, taking a long sip of my now lukewarm coffee. The next morning, it officially began. I went to grab an Amazon package off my porch, a new set of crimpers I was probably way too excited about, and found it. The opening salvo. A pristine, A4-sized sheet of paper, heat-laminated and taped to my front door with an aggressive amount of packing tape. It was an official notice from the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association Architectural Review Committee. Just reading the name made my soul tired. The notice was a masterpiece of the form. It was a symphony of passive-aggressive corporate jargon that managed to say everything and nothing at once. It referred to an unapproved vertical structure on my property. It cited a bylaw so vague it could have been written by a psychic, maintaining the aesthetic harmony of the community. The phrase itself was an affront to both aesthetics and harmony. It concluded with a demand that I submit a structural application and aesthetic impact report to the committee for review within 7 days. I peeled the notice off my door. The lamination gave it a sinister, permanent feel. I read it again, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity. Aesthetic harmony? My internal monologue, a companion I'd come to rely on for its unfiltered sarcasm, kicked into high gear. Lady, my tower is the most harmonious thing in this entire beige-colored hellscape. It has a purpose. It's a finely tuned instrument. Your army of identical soulless lawn gnomes, on the other hand, is a crime against ceramics and good taste. Where's their aesthetic impact report? I stalked back inside, the laminated paper crinkling in my fist, and immediately dialed my best friend. Dave, I said, skipping the pleasantries. You are not going to believe this. I've been formally noticed. Dave's groan on the other end of the line was immediate and empathetic. Oh no, not the Beige Brigade. What is it this time? Is your mailbox half an inch too tall? Did you use a non-sanctioned shade of mulch? Worse, so much worse. The needle. She called it an unapproved vertical structure. She? Dave asked, though he already knew the answer. Let me guess. New neighbor? White SUV that's never seen a speck of dirt? Looks like she asks to speak to the manager of the universe on a daily basis? The very one. Carol Miller. According to the letterhead, she's the president of the whole damn circus. I'm supposed to submit an aesthetic impact report. Dave burst out laughing. It was a loud, wheezing sound that made me feel slightly better. Dude, oh my God, that's easy. Get a single sheet of paper. Draw a giant middle finger on it. A really detailed one. Right aesthetically impactful, ain't it? At the bottom, submit that. Tempting, I sighed, running a hand through my hair. So tempting. But this is different, man. This thing is actually important. I can't just go to war with these people. I have to play the game. For now. Good luck, man, Dave said, his laughter subsiding. Playing a game with someone who makes up the rules as she goes is a losing proposition. He wasn't wrong, but I had to try. For the first time in my civilian life, I was on a mission. Mission, reason with the unreasonable. Armed with a meticulously organized binder, I strode across the street later that day. It was my olive branch, my evidence locker. Inside, I had everything. FCC licenses, the original city permits from the previous owner, structural engineering specs, a letter of commendation from the county sheriff's office, and, front and center, a glowing letter from Maria explaining the tower's vital role in SAR operations. If facts and logic were weapons, I was walking in with a full arsenal. I found Carol in her natural habitat, her driveway. She was on her hands and knees, but not gardening. She was using a toothbrush to scrub the tire rims of her sterile white SUV. It was a level of meticulousness that bordered on the pathological. "Hi, Carol," I said, trying to sound as friendly and non-threatening as possible. "I'm Jack Reynolds from across the street. I got your notice." She didn't look up. She just kept scrubbing. "I'm aware." "Right. Well, I think there's just been a bit of a misunderstanding. I wanted to show you what this is all about." I brandished the binder like a holy text. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice as cold and flat as the concrete she was kneeling on. "The bylaws are quite clear. Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 3. All external structures must be pre-approved by the committee. Was it pre-approved?" Well, no, the tower was actually here when I bought the house, and the previous owner had all the city permits. The bylaws, she interrupted, finally straightening up and fixing me with a gaze that could freeze dry a cup of coffee, are not concerned with previous owners. They are concerned with current compliance. The structure is an eyesore. It lowers property values. I fought to keep my jaw from hitting the pavement. With all due respect, it really doesn't. It's a vital piece of communications equipment. It's not for me, it's for the county. It helps guide air rescue operations, people who are lost or hurt. Here, I have a letter from the head of the county search and rescue team explaining. She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture so sharp it was almost violent. It was as if the very existence of my binder was an insult to her. I'm not interested in your letters. I'm interested in the rules. That thing is ugly, and frankly, it's probably giving off all sorts of dangerous radiation. My begonias have been looking wilted ever since you moved in. Lady, the only dangerous radiation in this neighborhood is radiating directly from your permafrown, my inner monologue screamed. I took a deep, calming breath. It's non-ionizing radio waves, I explained, trying to channel my inner science teacher. It's less radiation than your cell phone or your microwave. It's perfectly safe. It saves lives, Carol. The only life I'm concerned with, she said, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone, is the life of this community's aesthetic. You have 6 days to submit your report. She turned her back on me, picked up her toothbrush, and went back to scouring her tire rims, the conversation officially over. I stood there for a long moment, clutching my binder of useless facts, utterly defeated by the sheer, immovable force of her magnificent ignorance. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. This was going to be a war. My first move in this new war was a strategic retreat into paperwork. If she wanted a report, I would give her the mother of all reports. I spent the next 2 days in a caffeine-fueled haze, channeling my technical writing skills into creating a document so dense, so detailed, so overwhelmingly comprehensive that it would crush her will to live. The final product was a 112-page PDF. It included the FCC licenses, the city permits, and the structural engineering reports. It had testimonials not just from Maria, but from a sheriff's deputy and a local fire chief. I wrote a 10-page layman's explanation of radio wave propagation, complete with diagrams I drew myself using bright, friendly colors as if illustrating a children's book. See the happy little radio wave. It's going to help the helicopter. I included a market analysis of property values in neighborhoods with and without amateur radio towers. Spoiler, it makes no difference. For the aesthetic impact section, I included a series of high-resolution photographs of the tower taken at sunrise and sunset, artfully framed, arguing that its clean geometric lines provided a pleasing vertical contrast to the neighborhood's dominant horizontal suburban sprawl. I was particularly proud of that line. I hit send, launching my digital bombshell into the official HOA email abyss, and sat back, smug. Let's see her argue with that. The response came 2 minutes later. An automated reply. Thank you for your submission. The Architectural Review Committee meets on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Your submission will be considered at the next scheduled meeting. The next meeting was in 3 weeks. 2 days later, another laminated notice appeared on my door. It was a fine. $50. The reason? Failure to remediate non-compliant structure. My smugness evaporated, replaced by a hot, simmering rage. I was following her insane rules, and she was fining me anyway. This wasn't about compliance. It was a power trip. This was about her winning. I sent a quick text to Maria. Jack, all good for now? Fighting a war on the home front. My tower has been declared aesthetically unharmonious. Maria. Oh no. HOA. Jack. The queen of them all. Don't worry, I'll keep it operational. Wouldn't want you guys trying to navigate Hadley's Peak with a handheld. Maria. You're the best. Let me know if you need another official letter. I can make it sound very official. Use words like pursuant and henceforth. Jack. Thanks. I might need you to land a helicopter on her lawn to make a point. Maria. Don't tempt me. Her humor helped, but the frustration was gnawing at me. I decided my next move needed to be proactive. I'd get my own inspection done, get it notarized, and prove the tower was perfectly safe and sound. I called the only contractors I knew who might be up for such a weird job. Gus's Gutter and Siding. Gus was a grizzled veteran of the suburban contracting wars, a man who had seen the dark heart of many an HOA dispute. His apprentice, Pablo, was young, perpetually optimistic, and full of a boundless enthusiasm that Gus seemed determined to temper with a healthy dose of cynicism. They arrived in their beat-up pickup truck, and as Gus was sizing up the tower with a critical eye, a police cruiser glided silently to the curb. Out stepped a young officer, his expression a perfect mask of world weariness, his name tag read Miller. And for a terrifying second, I thought he was related to her. "Afternoon," Officer Miller said, his voice devoid of any real interest. "Getting some complaints about, well, that." He gestured vaguely at the needle. "Let me guess," I sighed. "A Carol Miller complaint?" He let out a long, suffering sigh of his own. "She's prolific. Says you're building an illegal structure." "I'm not building it, I'm inspecting it," I said, trying to keep my own voice even. "It's been here for years. It's a radio tower for emergency communications." Gus, the contractor, shuffled his feet nervously. "Look, man, we're just here to do a quick inspection for him. We don't want any trouble with the HOA. Pablo, meanwhile, was staring up at the tower, his eyes wide with wonder. "Is that thing for real? Does it talk to aliens?" "Only on Tuesdays," I deadpanned to Pablo, then turned back to the officer. "Is it illegal to inspect my own property now?" "It's not a criminal matter," Officer Miller said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is a civil dispute, HOA business. Frankly, I wish you all would just, I don't know, talk it out, or have a duel at dawn, something to resolve it." "I tried talking," I said. "It's like talking to a wall, a very stubborn beige-painted wall that thinks radio waves wilt begonias." The officer actually cracked a tiny smile at that. "Yeah, that sounds about right. Look, she's also claiming it violates a city ordinance about height." He pulled out his phone and tapped at it for a moment. "Let me see. Yep, she's wrong. You're zoned for it. The city doesn't care. Just try to keep the noise down." He gave a half-hearted shrug and got back in his car, clearly eager to escape the gravitational pull of our petty drama. He drove off, leaving a cloud of awkward silence behind. Gus, the grizzled contractor, looked thoroughly spooked. "Listen, kid," he said, shaking his head and starting to pack up his ladder. "I've been doing this for 30 years. You don't mess with an HOA president with too much time on her hands. They're a different breed. They can ruin you. They'll fine you into bankruptcy, put liens on your house for having the wrong color petunias. It ain't worth it." "You're just going to leave?" I asked, incredulous. "My business insurance doesn't cover acts of Carol," Gus said grimly. "Sorry." Pablo looked genuinely disappointed. "But it's so cool." "Get in the truck, Pablo," Gus grumbled. They drove off, leaving me standing alone in my yard. I couldn't even pay someone to look at my tower. My enemy didn't need an army. She was winning this war with sheer, weaponized pettiness. A few days later, Carol escalated from bureaucratic warfare to a ground assault. I watched from my office window as she began her campaign, clipboard in hand. She went door to door, a suburban Napoleon rallying her troops. I could see her through my neighbor's windows, pointing dramatically at my tower, her expression one of grave concern. She'd nod sympathetically as my neighbors listened, their faces slowly morphing from polite interest to worried frowns. The fruit of her labor appeared in my mailbox that afternoon. It was a professionally printed flyer, in full color, with a dramatic, unflattering photo of the needle taken on a cloudy day to make it look as menacing as possible. The headline screamed, "Protect our property values and safety. Remove the Maple Creek monstrosity." It was a masterwork of fear-mongering. It hinted at the dangers of unknown radiation. It claimed the tower was a lightning magnet that endangered the entire block. My personal favorite was the assertion that its height and visibility made it a potential terrorist target. A terrorist target? My inner monologue sputtered with laughter and rage. Lady, the only thing this tower is a target for is your laser-focused insanity. And lightning? That's what a ground wire is for, you absolute potato. You'd have a better chance of being targeted by rogue garden gnomes. The propaganda was working, though. Later that day, I saw my next-door neighbor, Bill, a guy I'd shared beers with over the fence, out mowing his lawn. I went out to try and talk to him, to explain my side. "Hey, Bill," I started. He immediately tensed up. He refused to make eye contact, focusing intently on a patch of grass his mower had already passed over. "Hey, Jack," he mumbled. "Listen, about the tower and all this stuff Carol is spreading around." "Sorry, Jack," he cut me off, still not looking at me. I don't want any trouble." He yanked the cord on his mower, and the engine roared to life, effectively ending the conversation. He pushed it away as if fleeing the scene of a crime. I stood there, watching him go. The flyer had done its job. The social pressure was building. I was no longer just the guy with the cool tower. I was the neighborhood pariah, the man who was single-handedly threatening their property values with his monstrosity. The final blow came not as a laminated notice, but in a crisp, business-sized envelope delivered by a certified mail carrier who looked at me with an expression of pity. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from their law firm, Dewey, Cheatham and Howe, a name so cliché it had to be intentional. It was a formal cease and desist. The language was dense, a thicket of legalese designed to intimidate and confuse. But the message hidden within the wherefores and herebys was brutally clear. I had 48 hours to completely deactivate and begin the process of removing the tower. If I failed to comply, the HOA would file for an immediate court injunction and sue me, not just for the cost of removal, but for damages to the community's aesthetic value and, of course, all their legal fees. It cited the neighborhood petition as proof that the overwhelming majority of the community supported this action. This wasn't a fine. This was a tactical nuke. I was a freelance consultant. I had a mortgage. I couldn't afford to get into a protracted legal battle with an organization that was funded by the dues of all my neighbors. The very neighbors who now saw me as the enemy. The stress landed in my gut like a lead weight. All the work, the money, the passion I'd poured into the needle. It was all being threatened by one woman's tyrannical obsession with beige. I stared out the window at the tower, standing silent and proud in the afternoon sun. It looked like a monument to a battle I was about to lose. Across the street, a curtain twitched in Carol's window. I felt like she was watching me, savoring her victory. That night, I made the call. I couldn't risk my house, my financial stability. I couldn't fight a war on two fronts, one against Carol and another in a courtroom. Defeated, I walked into my radio room. The gentle hum of the equipment, usually a comforting sound, now felt like a ticking clock. With a heart heavier than I thought possible, I began the shutdown sequence. It felt like a betrayal. I methodically flipped the circuit breakers on the main power distribution unit. The powerful amplifiers went dark. I powered down the signal processors and the server that ran the tracking software. One by one, the lights on my rack went out. The room, usually a vibrant hub of light and energy, fell dark and quiet. Finally, I reached under the desk and physically disconnected the thick LMR400 coaxial cable that fed the antenna. The last link was severed. The needle was inert. The silence that filled the room was absolute, profound, and deafening. It was the sound of failure. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Maria's contact. This was the call I was dreading most. "Maria, it's Jack," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I have to power down the needle." There was a pause on the other end. "What? Why? Is something wrong with the equipment?" I squeezed my eyes shut. "Something's wrong with the neighbors. I got a cease and desist from the HOA's lawyer. They're threatening to sue me into oblivion if I don't take it down." "Jack, no," she said, her voice tight with concern. "You can't. We have a search team on standby. There's that big storm system moving in tomorrow afternoon. The Weather Service is calling for flash floods in the canyons." "I know," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'm sorry, my hands are tied. You'll have to rely on the county repeater. Maybe it'll work this time." Another long, heavy pause stretched between us. I could hear the unspoken reality. The county repeater wouldn't work. Not where it mattered. "Okay, Jack," she finally said, her professional calm back in place, but I could hear the strain. "I understand. You do what you have to do. Just be careful." The line clicked off. I sat there in my dark, silent radio room, the ghost of my passion project all around me. I had chosen my house over their lives. And it felt horrible. Outside, the moon cast a pale light on the useless metal totem in my backyard, a silent testament to my surrender. The next day, the storm arrived right on schedule. It wasn't a gentle spring shower. It was an atmospheric assault. Rain came down in blinding sheets, driven sideways by a wind that howled like a banshee. It was the kind of weather that made you glad to be inside, warm and dry, but I wasn't. My stomach was a tight knot of anxiety. I was listlessly flipping through channels, the TV noise doing nothing to drown out the guilt echoing in my head. On the desk beside the couch, my old police scanner, a habit I'd never kicked from my Air Force days, was quietly murmuring. Mostly it was routine traffic calls, fender benders, the usual background noise of a city shutting down in a storm. And then I heard it. The call was garbled, broken up by static and the roar of the wind. "One dispatcher. This is Crackle, family of hikers, Blackwood Canyon to hiss, caught in flash flood." My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright, cranking the volume on the scanner. Blackwood Canyon. The deepest, most notorious communications dead zone in the entire county. "Child is with them. Injury reported. Phone signal is Crackle. Dying. We need air rescue." My heart hammered against my ribs. I could hear the dispatcher trying to coordinate with the SAR helicopter team, but the transmission was a disaster. The storm was playing havoc with the county's already pathetic signal. The SAR pilot's voice cut through the static, tinny and frantic. "Repeat, we've lost visual and comms are shot. Can't get a lock on the county repeater from this canyon and it's all Crackle. White noise down here. We're flying blind." I knew why. I knew exactly why. Blackwood Canyon was a granite fortress. The low-powered county signal just bounced off its sheer walls. The needle, my needle, was positioned perfectly on its high-ground perch to fire a clean signal right down the canyon's throat. It was the key, and I had turned it off. I leaped from the couch and started pacing, a caged animal in my own living room. My gaze fell on the cease and desist letter, still sitting on the coffee table. The legal threats, the lawsuit, the fines, the possibility of losing my house. It all swirled in my head. Then I pictured it. A family, a kid, huddled on some rock in the dark, the water rising around them, hurt and terrified. They were calling for help, and the rescuers couldn't hear them. Because of me. Because I had caved to a bully. The internal debate wasn't a debate at all. It was a primal scream. The carefully constructed world of risk assessment and financial stability I'd built for myself shattered in an instant, replaced by a single, simple clarity. "To hell with it!" I snarled to the empty room. I didn't run, I sprinted. I burst into my dark radio room and my hands flew across the equipment, my muscle memory taking over. I slammed the main breakers back on. The power distribution unit whirred to life. One by one, the server, the processors, the amplifiers lit up, bathing the room in their familiar, comforting glow. I snatched the thick coaxial cable and slammed it back into its port, twisting the connector until my knuckles were white. The link was re-established. Power was flowing. The needle was alive. Grabbing the microphone, my hand steady, I keyed the transmit button. My voice was firm, clear, and cut through the storm like a hot knife through butter. "SAR Command, this is Civilian Station Kilo Juno 7 Alpha. Do you copy, over?" For a heart-stopping second, there was only static. Then, a voice burst from my speakers, so clear and sudden it made me jump. It was Maria. "Jack, thank God! We read you 5 by 5. Jack, we're flying blind out here." The relief in her voice was a physical thing. "I've got you, Maria," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard, initiating the directional antenna controls. "Powering up the directional now. Give me 30 seconds to get a lock." The next few minutes were a blur of focused intensity. My living room, my legal troubles, Carol Miller, they all ceased to exist. There was only the data on my screens, the voice in my ears, and the people in the canyon. "Okay, Maria, I'm boosting the gain," I said, manipulating a virtual slider on my screen. The tower outside whirred almost imperceptibly as the antenna array reoriented itself. "I'm painting a signal right down the throat of Blackwood. Tell your pilot to switch to frequency 146.52. "Copy that, Jack. Switching now." A new voice, the pilot's, crackled to life, no longer tinny and distant, but rich and crystal clear, as if he were sitting next to me. "Holy, I've got a signal. It's like the sun just came out. Command, we've got a solid lock." "That's my guy," Maria's voice said. "He's your eyes, pilot. Listen to him." Now the real work began. The family's cell phone was nearly dead, its signal a microscopic whisper in the electronic storm. The SR helicopter's equipment couldn't even detect it. But my system, my beautiful, overpowered, over-engineered system could. I saw a tiny, flickering blip on my screen. "Okay, pilot. I'm showing their signal at bearing 2907 from your current position," I said, my voice calm, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Faint, but it's there. Descend to 500 feet. You should clear the main ridge." "Copy, descending to 500. The wind is nasty down here, Jack. It's like a washing machine." "Stay with it. You're about a quarter mile out. The terrain map shows a small clearing near the river bend. That's your best bet for a landing zone." Just as I said that, a new sound intruded, a furious, percussive pounding on my front door. Bam, bam, bam. I ignored it. "You're getting closer, pilot. Signal strength is increasing. They have to be right below you." The pounding on the door got louder, more frantic. It was accompanied by a shrill, screeching voice that even the storm couldn't drown out. "I know you're in there, Reynolds. You are in violation of a legal order. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer." It was Carol. Of course, it was Carol. I squeezed my eyes shut, blocking her out, focusing only on the pilot's voice and the blip on my screen. The two realities were crashing together. The life-or-death struggle in the canyon and the petty, pathetic drama on my front porch. "Look for a heat signature," I urged the pilot. "Anything out of place." "Bam, bam, bam. I will have you arrested. I will have that thing torn down if I have to do it myself." "I see them!" the pilot's voice suddenly shouted, crackling with adrenaline and relief. "I have a visual, a light. They're waving a flashlight. Command, we have found the hikers. We have found the family." A wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me washed over. I slumped back in my chair, my body trembling, sweat plastering my t-shirt to my back. Over the speakers, I could hear the professional, efficient sounds of the rescue getting underway, the hoist being lowered, the calm instructions being relayed. The pounding on my door continued, a frantic, impotent rhythm against the backdrop of the successful rescue. But it didn't matter anymore. It was just noise. Pathetic, meaningless noise. I had made my choice and people were going to live because of it. Let her pound. An hour later, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. The rescue was complete. The family, a husband with a broken leg, a wife with mild hypothermia, and a terrified but unharmed 8-year-old girl, were safe and on their way to the hospital. And then I heard it. A different sound. The distinctive whoomp 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 of helicopter blades. I walked to my living room window and looked out. The SAR helicopter, a beautiful Sikorsky HH-60, was doing a low, slow pass directly over my neighborhood. As it flew over my house, it dipped its nose and waggled its wings from side to side, a clear, unambiguous salute. A public thank you. Then it banked and headed back towards its base. Down on the street, the scene was pure chaos. The pounding on my door had been replaced by the flashing red and blue lights of 2 police cars. Officer Miller was there, looking even more tired than before. And a local news van, the kind with a satellite dish on top, had pulled up, having obviously picked up the drama from the scanner chatter. And in the center of it all, illuminated by the flashing lights, was Carol. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was having a full-blown, arms-flailing, foot-stomping public meltdown. "He turned it back on!" She was screeching at Officer Miller, her voice hoarse. "He willfully violated a legally binding cease and desist. I want him arrested. I want that thing torn down." Officer Miller held up a hand, his patience clearly worn to a single frayed thread. "Ma'am, for the last time, I am not arresting him. He just helped save 3 people's lives, including a child's. Do you understand that?" "He's a menace!" she shrieked, completely detached from reality. "What about the bylaws? The aesthetic harmony?" Just then, the news reporter, a young woman with a microphone, saw me step out onto my porch. She made a beeline for me. Sir, can you confirm that it was your radio tower that was instrumental in the rescue tonight?" she asked, shoving the microphone in my face. I looked past her at Carol's contorted face, at Officer Miller's exhausted expression, at the neighbors who were now starting to creep out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. I gave a small, calm smile. "It's just a hobby," I said, my voice carrying in the quiet aftermath of the storm. "Glad I could help." That was the turning point. The neighbors, who had heard the scanner traffic, who had seen the helicopters salute with their own eyes, now saw Carol's unhinged ranting for what it was. They saw a woman screaming about aesthetics while a man on their street had just been part of a life-saving miracle. Bill, the neighbor who had shunned me, stood on his lawn looking deeply, profoundly ashamed. The tide of public opinion didn't just turn, it was a tsunami. The next day was surreal. My face was on the local news website, the headline reading, "Local ham radio operator's illegal tower saves lost family." My phone, which had been silent for weeks except for spam calls, was now blowing up. calls from grateful SAR team members, an official call from the county sheriff, personally thanking me, even a message from the mayor's office. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I half expected it to be a process server, but when I opened it, I found a small delegation from the neighborhood, led by a deeply embarrassed-looking Bill. He was holding a giant gift basket, the kind filled with artisanal cheeses and weird crackers. "Jack," Bill said, shuffling his feet, We wanted to apologize. We heard what Carol was saying, and we were wrong. What you did last night, that was amazing. We're sorry." The best call came an hour later. It was a man from the law firm Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. His voice was clipped and professional, but I could hear the undercurrent of frantic damage control. He formally, and with great haste, informed me that the cease and desist was rescinded, and that the HOA board would be taking no further action. In fact, he explained, there had been an emergency meeting that morning. Carol Miller had been forced to resign as president. The story of her trying to shut down a critical piece of rescue infrastructure to protect the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony had made her a local laughingstock and a pariah. A week later, I was back in my radio room. The equipment hummed its gentle, reassuring song. Outside, the needle stood against the blue sky, no longer a point of contention, but a landmark, a symbol. I was checking my email when one popped up from the Maple Creek Estates HOA. My finger hovered over the delete button out of habit, but I opened it. It was from the new board president, a reasonable woman I'd seen walking her dog. It was a notification about a newly passed bylaw. I clicked the attachment. There it was, in black and white. Bylaw 7. C. Emergency Communications Exemption. Any structure, antenna, or apparatus verified by county emergency services, including, but not limited to, county sheriff, fire department, and contracted search and rescue teams, as being vital to public safety is hereby exempt from all architectural and aesthetic regulations set forth in this document. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, slow laugh. I had won. My phone rang. It was Dave. "So you won," he said, his voice full of glee. "You actually did it. You went to war with the final boss of all HOAs, and you won." I glanced out the window. "A for Sale" sign, stark and beautiful, was now planted in the middle of Carol Miller's perfectly manicured lawn. "Yep," I said, a wide grin spreading across my face. "Turns out the best way to deal with a Karen is to save a few lives. It really, really ruins their whole argument." "So, what's next?" Dave asked. "You gonna run for the board? Become the new tyrant?" "God, no," I scoffed. "I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the sound of a perfectly clear signal." I took a long, satisfying sip of my coffee, the victory sweet and absolute. "And maybe," I added, a glint in my eye, "just maybe I'll install a slightly bigger antenna. For a better aesthetic, of course,